Hello, and thank you for joining us virtually for the Mile No-Till Field Day talks under the soybean production tent. My name is Heather Kelly, and along with me, my PhD student, Elias Zuchelli, helped develop this presentation about factors influencing soybean fungicide response. So first, I always want to go over the disease pyramid, and that is outlining the factors needed to result in yield loss due to disease being a pest. And so you can use pest as an acronym to remember these 4 factors. And really, it's these 4 factors that are going to influence whether you get a fungicide response in yield. And so that is P for pest or pathogen. This is going to be influenced by your field history, location, cover crops, etc. Next, an E for environment. The environment that promotes disease development usually also promotes really high yield. So here in Tennessee, we usually do have really good conditions, not only to grow soybean, but also to have a lot of disease development. While we can't control the environment, we can influence planting date and the density of our planting, which can help influence this environment. S is for susceptible host, so your variety selection. And so that's really big in playing into also what you'll see is into the soybean, into a fungicide response. And then lastly, T is in time. So these 3 previous factors all have to occur at a critical time or growth stage to actually result in yield loss and where action is needed to protect that yield. And so with those 4 factors, we have resources online to help you identify or manage these different issues that can cause disease loss in yield. So our guide.utcrops.com will help you identify the pathogens, the diseases, as well as insects you might have in your field across all field crops. utcrops.com is our home base site. Again, just general information and publications, again, help you maybe understand some of your better environmental conditions that you can control. Search.utcrops.com has our variety database on it. And all of it is slowly becoming mobile friendly as well as becoming searchable. And then lastly, news.utcrops.com is our newsletter, our blog site. That throughout the season we're posting articles, not just on diseases and insects, but also weed management, fertility, and doing it in real time, what you need to be doing during the season. And so you can subscribe to a weekly email to get that, or just check it out when you feel like it, or you can also follow us on Twitter. So getting into those first 2 factors, pathogen and environment, factors that contribute to a fungicide response, you have to have a disease present. And so our main foliar diseases that will respond to a foliar fungicide include frog eye leaf spot, target spot, septoria brown spot, with frog eye leaf spot being the predominant one. Also, that environment is very high risk when it's continuous soybean. Also, no-till can increase that risk with that residue still being left on the ground, as well as usually fields that have high yield potential. Again, that same environment that's good for the high yield is also good for disease development. And so to give you an idea here in Tennessee, what diseases and kind of the levels we can find it, or the incidence, we can find them across the season. So starting about mid-July, we might still have some downy mildew out in the fields, but as we warm up even considerably more across the season, our downy mildew plays out, is really not affecting our yield at all, but that's when our frog eye leaf spot picks up, that blue line there. We have some septoria brown spot always hanging around, usually just in the lower canopy, but that it continues to increase throughout the season. Target spot also low in the canopy, and just depending on variety, might not get much. And then the purple line is Cercospora leaf blight, but here in Tennessee, we only really see it uptick a little bit at the end of the season and usually not cutting into our yield. And so then moving on to our other 2 factors, susceptible host and timing. So again, the susceptibility to our main foliar diseases will influence that fungicide response. Again, the main focus being on frog eye leaf spot. And note that non-foliar diseases like stem canker or sudden death syndrome, which do show symptoms on the leaves, they are not going to respond to a foliar fungicide. So again, use that guide.utcrops.com site to make sure you're identifying the right disease that would respond to a fungicide. And so timing, the earlier disease develops, that equates to a greater potential for yield impact, i.e. the need for fungicide protection and to have that response from a fungicide. And so some nice visual aerial imagery for fungicide response. And so here are some small plots. As you see from above, the ones outlined in green here are our non-treated checks, and they yielded 48 or 46 bushels per acre compared to our other plots outlined in green now that were treated with a fungicide at R3 and yielded 10 bushel per acre more. Of course, and they're greener later in the season. And so while I'm going to be focusing on some fungicide applications today and variety selection, I also still want to come back to the overall disease pyramid or triangle to also recall that there are other cultural practices too to be done, to be mindful of, to help reduce disease and manage yield loss to it, as they all kind of feed into each other. And so the data I'm going to show you is from two different trials, if you will, where we're investigating a response to fungicides. And so these trials were done in 2018 through 2020 across 3 seasons in small randomized replicated plots. And replicated meaning with 4 replications, and then also each year this was the same trial was planted anywhere from 2 to 3 different locations. Frog eye leaf spot was the disease rated, and also yields were recorded. And so for the first trial, which is our variety evaluation, 268 different soybean varieties were evaluated, ranging from maturity group 3 to group 5. And across these trials, Quadras Top SVX was applied at 7 fluid ounces per acre at growth stage R3. The other trial that we'll show data on was our fungicide evaluation trial, where 8 different fungicides were evaluated, all applied at growth stage R3. Not all 8 fungicides were evaluated across all 3 years. We only had, I believe, 3 consistent ones that will show across all 3 years, and then kind of explain though the ones we did have and show you the number of site years of data that we do have for each. So some results for the variety trial. So we have on the left to right of the screen the number of varieties that fell into different categories of susceptibility. So here, pictured here, a high susceptibility of frog eye leaf spot, an image here to give you an idea of what we consider high disease susceptibility. We had 37 of our 268 varieties that we rated as high, 72 as moderately susceptible, and then all the way on the right-hand side of the screen, 159 varieties rated as low, which means very little to maybe no frog eye leaf spot developed at all on it, which is good. The majority of the varieties we're screening, commercial varieties, are in this low susceptibility or resistant category. What was interesting at the bottom of the screen, the varieties, the number of varieties, the percentage of varieties with a yield increase of at least 2 bushels per acre with using that fungicide at R3, we had 70% of our high susceptible varieties having that type of response, and 76% of the varieties in both moderate and low also have a response, which was quite interesting that it was so similar across these susceptibility categories. Similarly, when you look at the average response to a fungicide in bushels per acre, on average, 3.9, slightly higher in our highly susceptible, 3.5 in our moderate, 3.8 in our low susceptible variety. Again, though, this is just in groupings of frog eye leaf spot susceptibility. Some of this may also be accounted or be attributed to helping reduce other diseases such as our target spot or Septoria brown spot that's contributing to this. When you dive into the data more specifically by year, by location, plot it out as it is in the scatter plot and put some lines to it, you see our highly susceptible varieties. As the disease increases, our yield potential reduces. Similarly, a similar trend with our moderate susceptible varieties with lower disease, with lower yield as our disease severity increases. Now yield, this is frog eye leaf spot, actually shows a strange increase when disease increases for our slow, meaning resistant varieties. But again, this is a little misleading because for the most part, these varieties really, there's just an outlier that's kind of probably driving this trend, because in general, we're not seeing enough disease on these low susceptible varieties that's really affecting our yield. But again, that decrease trend in our highly susceptible and our moderately susceptible varieties is what we expect to see. And so in general, we know a fungicide is needed more so on our highly susceptible and moderately susceptible variety, but are there fungicides that work better? And so with that, just in general, one of our studies, which was over a longer course of time at one location, we see variation in the amount of disease we saw each year, anywhere from 68% all the way down to 5%. And these letters are statistical separation, meaning statistically 2013 had the greatest disease versus 2014, 16, 17, and 18 statistically had the same amount of disease, even though numerically they are different. And so looking across those years and examining the percent of control we got from frog eye leaf spot, or for frog eye leaf spot from pyraclostrobin, which is a solo QOI, this would be headline. You can see the population of frog eye leaf spot had developed resistance to this group of fungicides, where we then were getting no control, where our DMIs, or our triazoles, flutriafol, which is top guard, and tetraconazole, which is Domark, were still showing good control over the years, as well as our thiophenate methyl, which is our MBC or Topsin product. And so in general, just an illustration on how solo AIs of a QOI product, a strobilurin product, will not work against frog eye leaf spot. And a DMI and MBC product are much better at controlling frog eye leaf spot, and that they should be used in a combination or a premix to avoid this fungicide resistance. Similarly, looking on average across 2018, 19, and 20, these bars are representing the yield. And again, the letters, if they're all the same letter, it means statistically they are not different. And so in 2018, where we had 4% on average frog eye leaf spot severity, which is outlined by the dotted line, the box, and the number at the bottom here, we did not actually get any statistical difference in yield when comparing these 3 treatments to our non-treated check. The black bar is where we did not put out fungicide. But in our 2019 and 2020, on average across locations where we did have higher disease severity, we did get a response. In 2019 with our Acropolis and our Quadris plus Tilt. And in slightly higher here, we had all treatments statistically increased yield. And so diving in a little bit more to all the products we looked at across all years, but again, some of these we don't have as many years of data with it. Everything reduced our actual frog eye leaf spot severity, which are these blue bars here, and our non-treated check on the far left. And then this green line is now our yield associated with the right side axis. And so here again, numerically, everything did better than our non-treated check, but statistically, only our Acropolis at 49.3 and our Revitec at 51.6 did better than our non-treated check. And again, to visualize what I mean by more data in some of these than other. So again, that previous graph is across all of our different varieties that were looked at. And that was something I meant to mention earlier. the fungicide evaluation was not done across just one variety. It was done across multiple varieties, specifically 3 different varieties each year that had a different rating to frog eye leaf spot. We weren't always able to use the exact same 3 varieties across all 3 years. It was a combination of these. And so with that, the one variety that was the same across all 8 site years used in this data set was the Pioneer variety, which essentially had absolutely no frog eye leaf spot develop on it, a true resistant variety. And so here, there was no frog eye leaf spot to be rated, but statistically, none of our fungicides in this variety had a response in yield. Numerically, Quadris Top SVX had a 4 bushel per acre response, Revitec a 3.6, and all others had 3.3 or less bushel per acre response compared to our non-treated check. Similarly, on our 2 varieties that were rated low for frog eye leaf spot, statistically, none of the fungicides actually had a response to yield. Surprisingly enough, though, we still had numeric trends where Revitec had 7.8 bushel per acre response, Miravis Top at 5.7, and all others were 4.2 or less. And then again, getting into more our moderately susceptible varieties, again, that similar trend where statistically none were different, but we had some numeric increases with some of those same products, the newer products on the market, Revitec and Miravis Top. And then only where we had our highly susceptible variety, which we were only able to use 1 year at 2 different locations, statistically, Quadris Top SVX had a 9.5 bushel per acre response over our non-treated check, and our Acropolis had a 6.8 bushel per acre response over our non-treated check. These 2 years specifically, that's where our Quadris plus Tilt and our Quadris plus tebuconazole did not have a response over our non-treated check. So again, in certain situations, higher disease susceptibility, a highly susceptible variety, the better products are doing better in protecting your yield and giving you a fungicide response. So with that, I want to again remind you of the resources online for you. Again, use that guide.utcrops.com to find out what you actually have going on in your field, what disease is present, if it would respond to a fungicide. Be mindful of your practices to have the lower disease environment. Variety selection, all the varieties that I spoke about that essentially fed into our results are on our variety database at search.utcrops.com. On there, each variety that I evaluate, it has the fungicide response, if you will, the bushel per acre difference between treated and non-treated with a fungicide at R3. And so you can look up your individual variety and see if I've looked at it for 1 year, multiple years, and have an idea of what response you may or may not see with it, depending on the environment you are growing it in. And then again, lastly, news.utcrops.com to check it out whenever you want to, or subscribe to get a weekly email that just shows you essentially the title and the first sentence or 2 of the new articles that have been posted each week, or follow us at Twitter. Thank you again for attending, and I hope you join us again in 2024.